Hello everybody, Christian from Treasure Town here, and I'm excited to present to you today the top 50 most valuable nickels. We'll be focusing on the coins from 1866 to present. There's a wide mix of items. It's going to include errors, varieties, and key dates, and I think it'll be super informative sort of wherever you are in your collecting journey. I'm going to highlight a lot of coins that you may not have heard of, starting with the 1943 D Jefferson nickel repunch mint mark. There's a lot of different repunch mint marks on the War Nickel series. These are minted from 1942 to 1945 out of 35% silver, and they have a large mint mark, either P, D, or S, Philadelphia, Denver, San Francisco, above Monticello on their reverse. However, they would produce the dies that struck the coins completely separately from the mint process, and so then they would, to be efficient, they would then send the dies to the different mints where they would punch the mint mark, and sometimes they would mess up when they punched it. So in this case, they first punched a D that was a little bit low. It didn't take as well as they wanted it to into the design, and so they then punched it again. This was a bit to the north, and you could expect values anywhere. If it's findable, it's probably a minimum $25 coin, but can be $100-$150 in mint state condition. The next one, we do have a few of these sort of key date spotlights. I'm not going to take too much time. The Jefferson nickel is 1938 to the present. This specific one, you're going to look for 1950D, a Denver mint mark, which would actually be found on the right of Monticello. It was only above the Monticello during the World War II time period, but these are all 35% silver. But for the 1950D, it's probably like $10 and up, but there can be some really high-end items, including full steps nickels, which is a totally separate video, but basically there can be coins that are $1, but if they have fully struck up steps, which is generally a weak area on the Jefferson nickel, they could be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, even up to about $17,000. Number 48 on our list is going to be a doubled die obverse of a more modern coin, the 2004 P Jefferson piece nickel. The Monticello design was used through 2003 and 2004. They had a few different commemorative designs, and one of them had doubling on the obverse side. You can see right here some shelving in the 4. It's not particularly well-known or easy to spot variety, but it's worth looking for and want to make sure that it was in this video. After that, some of the V nickels, which were from 1883 to 1912. The key ones are going to be 85, 86, and 1912S. They're also called Liberty Head nickels, and they can be super valuable. There's also going to be a much more valuable Liberty Head nickel that's later in the presentation, but one fun fact is we see right here cents. At first in 1883, they didn't have cents there, and people would gold plate them, especially in the west part of the United States, then try to pass them off as the new $5 gold coins. Then they switched it to add cents. To be very clear, V is the Roman numeral for 5. For number 46, we've got the 1945D, again, a war nickel coin, a double die obverse. That's an extra thickness double die, so there's actually a few different manifestations. It's not always super clear shelving, and in this case you can really tell the difference. The serif, which is like the pointy thing on the end of a letter, is going to be, normal thickness is observed over here. On the right we see a much more thick serif and full production of a lot of the lettering, but Liberty is going to be the best place to look for that, and the values again range up quite nicely, but $175 for an otherwise $10 mint state coin is quite a nice spread. And then here we've got the Buffalo nickels. There's a lot of different types. Again, type 2 on they first had a very raised mound on the reverse of the coin where 5 cents was sort of at the same level as this plateau or sort of up part of the bottom of the bison, but that would wear off extremely easily. So then they had a more recessed version, and that's what the type 2 means, but you can pause it and look more. There's going to be a lot of Buffalo nickels in this presentation. Right here we have our first error coin, which is just a really interesting one. It's struck on a thin planchet, sold for $150 about a decade ago, and it was a regular 1951S nickel, but the planchet was thin where when it was struck, the metal didn't sort of come through fully and wasn't able to flow properly into the die, so it's a really weak looking strike, even with some planchet defects over here. Not something super commonly seen. Basically, it's not always post-mint damage if you see something like that. And then right here, this is also super interesting with pretty minimal price history, but I would venture a guess that it's pretty rare. It's a misplaced mint mark. So again, remember how they manually place the mint marks on the coins. In this case, they placed the Denver D mint mark right to the left of the 5 when it should have been well below it. There's also a cud or a die break. Basically, the die breaks down over time and edge chips off, and then metal fills it. So there's a few different interesting things about this coin, but 9 total have been certified at NGC. Just an interesting item and a little bit unclear on the price point. And then after that, we've got some shield nickels. Again, 79, 80, and 81 are going to be the classic non-variety key dates. These are a bit rarer, and this was the very first type. We're not covering any half dimes in this presentation, but in 1866, they used to have a bunch of rays around the 5 extending out to the stars, but that was caused a lot of those die breaks and die chips that we were talking about earlier. It would wear down the dies way too fast, and so they removed them in 1867. Right here, I think that there's no more like general series discussions, is a 1945p double die reverse war nickel, where there's super clear spreading. This is a bit more traditional in the Monticello, especially as you go left to right at a bit of an angle. You can see it in the E and 5, but then again, far stronger spread as you move over in cents. Just another good reason to go through a bag of war nickels if you're looking for varieties. There's some really nice finds that can be made, and these are a bit more rare and valuable than the earlier double dies we mentioned. Again, a more modern nickel 2005D, we have the Speared Buffalo, which it's some sort, I actually am not exactly sure what happened to the die, but maybe some sort of impression was made where there's it's kind of a dent or a spear that goes through the back of the buffalo, and then obviously it's an easy one to kind of mark it and be like, hey, this is an interesting error because it's damaging the buffalo, similar to like the Speared Eagle in 2000, but this one can go from $50 to $450 for a coin that's otherwise worth 5 cents. So, and it's a modern one, which is always something I want to highlight. There's a double die obverse, pretty strong on the 1943p Jefferson war nickel with clear shelving in all of the lettering, Liberty, and the numbering. You can also see pretty clearly over here a doubled eye. There's some like Lincoln cents that are just entirely doubled eyes, and that's the only thing that you could see, but it's an additional marker that is exciting to know about. In 1954S, there's a double die reverse that's a little bit less traditional. Basically, there's been doubling at an angle of the bottom base of the left part of the steps in Monticello, and that's right above the N, and you can see how there's some protrusion right there. So another one that's maybe a little bit less common to be aware of, but I've seen these and I've owned them. They're interesting coins. In 1952, we've got this broken planchet coin. This would have been at the mint. It seems to be broken all the way through. I'm not sure why it didn't fall apart. It looks like it's a really jagged edge. If it had fallen apart authentically on its own, probably people would have debated whether it wasn't just cut by somebody, because you can cut it with machine tools, but I think it also would have been apparent just from the edge strike, would have looked natural. Anyways, $185, just a good reminder if you see a crack in a coin that could be something relatively valuable. Right here, 1942, this is not a war nickel because they didn't make, there were also, they switched over in 1942 to the silver composition. It's just a pretty clear shelving, again, in the double die, and you can see it all through In God, as well as the numbers, particularly in the 1, the 4, and the 2, both in the inner and outer loops there. And again, takes it from $1 to 250 or 50, like 25 cents in AU to $50. Great pickup, great thing to be searching for. And we also have, there's only one sold price. Similarly, so this one didn't have the P mint mark because it was implicit, excuse me, I'm switching back and forth a bunch, but it was implicit that this was minted in Philadelphia, whereas this one would have the P mint mark because they had started making them in Philadelphia with silver, but they wanted a way to differentiate them. And again, sold for $1,000 in Mint State 66. That's a nice bump because like just a shiny raw 1942p non-variety is going to be worth maybe like at this level $10 if it looks that nice, but if it's going to 100x, it's going to make the presentation at number 37. Right here, we've got a buffalo nickel that you should watch out for. I've owned a graded one of these. It's a double die reverse. There's very clear shelving and a split. In the all lettering in the 5, you can see there's like 2 bars in the E and this C and all of the different letters down below. Clear separation in the V and the F. super interesting. And it could be way, way higher up on the list if you're able to find it in good condition. It wasn't known for a while, so a lot of these circulated, but they're still worth several $100, kind of whatever condition, or, at least three figures, $100, and can range up quickly. So it's definitely good news if you can find one of these, one of the key Buffalo nickel varieties to be searching for. In 1961D, this was kind of interesting. It struck through and they retained it with a staple. It's always something that people are, any struck through error is interesting, but if what's been struck through is retained in the die, then that's much more exciting to collectors. It's sold for $345, but clearly circulated for a long time, so I'm always excited to spotlight circulated varieties and errors. This wasn't pulled out of pocket change for a long time. Right here we've got a 1949D over mint mark. This one is going to be, again, right of the Monticello is from 1938 to 1964 outside of the war nickels where you can find the mint mark. And I think you're going to be looking at the top left part of the Denver mint mark on this example. And again, there's enough of these out there where I wanted to make sure it was included in the list because they are also reasonably valuable. After that, we'll have the 1943 over 2 P. Jefferson war nickel, which is an overdate. Basically, they had a die that read 1942, and it was 1943, and so they wanted to keep using the die, and so they struck a 3 over the 2 so that they didn't have to throw out the whole die. As a result, you can see some of the remnants of the 2 are going to be, it's like a bar that extends from the bottom serif in the 3 to the main body of it. And this one is a bit more valuable, kind of 200 to 500 and more for ones in reasonable condition. You can find it, though, on more worn ones as well. 1941S has an interesting repunched mint mark that's also pretty sought after, especially in nice condition. It's probably best seen by this sort of extra bottom serif in the S on the sort of southwest side, and you can see a little bit within the rest of the S, but that's where I would look for at bottom left side. And again, most decent condition going to be worth 100 plus, so a good find. And in 1946, there's also this, it almost looks like extra thickness, but you can see some of the shelving and separation in the B, the E, really all through these letters, and ranges from 200 to 1,000 in about uncirculated condition, a little bit less if you go down. If it's super worn, maybe you won't be able to see it, but there should be also it could maybe present like extra thickness at that point. And then in 1990s, I actually have a story about this coin. I was really excited for my friend. I sold him a bunch of proof sets, and he went through and actually found one of these coins in it. They can definitely be found sort of in the many hundreds of dollars range, 300 to 750. This was a 1991. I think the easiest way to see it is going to be separation in the W. Also, you can see like on that outcropping of the E, but more so in the W, I would say, and perhaps a little bit through the lettering. This is going to be a pretty fine one, and you're going to need to train your eye to find the proof ones, but it's a good coin. So was really excited for him when I sold the set to him for like $4, and he made $300 on it. This one is also a really good reminder, one of my favorite errors in this presentation. It's a rotated double strike in collar. It's VF20. Nobody noticed this for a long time. But basically the coin was struck, and then it rotated in the collar that was holding it in to receive strikes, and then it received another strike. And so you can tell probably best because this E pluribus unum has been repeated twice, but there's like an underhost planchet. A lot sort of looks off on the coin, but it sold for $650, and just really cool. Good reminder that there's a lot of circulated, just as you look at any coin, you want to keep an eye out to see if there's something special about it. And in this case, that's a $600+ find. This one's a bit more obvious, but just kind of interesting. This was struck through cloth pretty clearly, and there's a bunch of struck through errors. We had the retained one earlier. This one, the cloth is not retained, but was significant enough. The back looks great, looks very normal. On this one, it's a wonder that they were able to figure out that was 1964, but they did, and it was an $860 find. Right here, this is the only shield nickel variety, but this is a large 3 over small 3. There was a repunching again of the die, and there was a small 3 that was used on this one. It seems pretty close to the 7 they punched over with this larger 3, and this goes, as opposed to being like a $50 coin, it's $1,000, even in pretty worn condition, and can get super expensive as it gets in nicer condition. So another good variety. And then right here, this is a variety or error. Basically, they left off the S for the San Francisco Mint where they were producing these proof coins, and it's a proof strike. So a regular 1970 one is not going to be valuable, but if it's the no S proof, no mint mark, and this one I haven't found, but I know people who have found it, is going to be in the 800 at the floor, but most of these are more towards the 1200 and up range, given that it's from 1971. They had a little bit better production quality at that point. This is a super significant die break from 1967. Most of these probably have been found, but basically die breaks, this is a more advanced one, is when there's that wear on the planchet, and eventually they're able to, not wear on the planchet, wear on the die, it breaks down, and then it sort of produces this effect. Sold for $1,200. Again, just pretty significant, and there's a lot more cheap cuds, but a lot of them are pretty popular. They've been hot with collectors recently. And then right here we have a double die reverse on the 1939 Jefferson nickel. This is pretty well known, a bit more common, and there's some serious doubling here. So I think it's also a fun collector coin if you want to buy it as like a nice example of what doubling on a Jefferson nickel would look like. It'll be a little more expensive than some of the other ones that I talked about in this presentation, but super seeing double vision on the Monticello, same thing all through the 5 cents, and 200 plus. Again, if it's super worn, it'll be cheaper, so maybe that's a good target if you're just looking for something fun to add to the collection. Right here we've got the 1939 double die reverse number 2, more clear separation, again shelving in basically all the lettering, and it's more horizontal or vertical, but you can see this one pretty clearly doesn't need like a big magnifier. It can help, but also another one to look for in 1939. And then the 1937 D 3-legged buffalo is also sort of a great coin to look for. There was just excessive die polishing because they would prepare the dies that strike the coins that removed one of the legs of the buffalo nickel in the Denver minted 1937 coin. They start 600 and go up. Fun little story here. You probably don't care about it, but one of the first times I was in the coin shop that I got my first job from, there was somebody else working the counter. They offered me a 3-legged buffalo for $100, and I asked them twice to check the price. And yeah, it was still back then like $500 or $600. And then the owner trusted me a lot more and offered me a job not too long after. So maybe I also should have just not told him. But the 1936D has a slightly more valuable 3.5-legged buffalo. This is a little bit more challenging to see, but you're going to be looking in the hind legs here, and there's going to be much less of shelving and separation between the sort of third leg versus the background. Here's a normal leg where there's just a clear delineation between what's leg and what's not, so they call this just a 3.5 leg. Those are the only leg variety coins in the Buffalo Nickel series, but again, they're pretty popular, quite valuable, and some of the best known U.S. coin errors. Right here, or varieties, I should say. Right here is just a crazy one, a damaged 1940 Indian quarter rupee, which would have probably been 50% silver. I know in World War II they were making 50% silver coins. Sold for $1,600 a while ago. I don't know how. It was probably mint interference that we struck a 1964D nickel on the top of this thing, but crazy coin, and I do like in the top 50 list to just do some also kind of mind-blowing things, including this struck 100 times, and that's honestly just an estimate, but there's just been a massive amount of strikes, and the planchet has expanded in a huge way of this Jefferson nickel that was probably caught between the two dies and just kept on receiving strikes and strikes and strikes. Is this mint interference or not? Again, that's not something I can comment on, but seems much more unlikely than some of the other double or triple struck coins that are more conceivable. Right here, there's a pretty well-known 1964D repunched mint mark, and it's one of the big ones to look for, and a little bit more common, but it's like a $3,000 coin in mint state 65, and there are sold prices. I have no idea. I think that there's a lot more varieties that I would purchase before I got this one, but 1964 nickel, it's worth $3,000 we're going to be talking about. The value goes down significantly in lower condition, but still pretty significant. You can see, in the middle, it's not one that I've found, but this one, again, is sort of the grown-up version of the Buffalo nickel that was double struck, rotated in collar. So this one here, the V is like super different, but it's still circulated until it was worn down to sort of a fine condition. And I just think it's a really, really neat error. Whoever paid for this was definitely getting a sweet error coin for their collection. I hope that they have like a double striking collar for all, the different denominations. I don't know if they exist in all denominations, especially the shield nickel. This one's a really struck off center coin that sold for $3,450. It's also not just a regular 1961. Instead, it's a proof one. So again, would have had a lot more care, and the proof errors are going to be more valuable and more unlikely to happen, but it's been prepared with the proof dies. And the off-center nickels, something like this, if it was just regular, I don't know what that would cost. Maybe like $30, $40 if it wasn't a proof, but this one is in great condition and has that qualifier. This 1942D, it's like a repunched but also 90-degree like inverted mint mark, is pretty valuable and a fun one to look for. This is not a silver coin, but you can see the first D was punched at a 90-degree angle coming down, and then here's the regular Denver mint mark to the right of Monticello. Again, worth a few $100 to a few thousand depending on the condition. You can also look for already graded coins, that sort of thing. Here's a double denomination. This was over a struck dime, presumably also from 1996, because it says 199, and then what looks like the beginning of a 6, sold for $5,000. Pretty rare to have this happen as late as 1996, though errors really went down starting in about 2002. But hey, again, it's a $5,000 coin, and if something looks funny and you see, Roosevelt's head peeking out of any nickel that you see, you probably want to hold on to it. 1965, this is a really neat one. It was struck on a dime planchet, but also a silver dime planchet. So that was also pretty rare because we had ostensibly phased out silver by 1964. Of course, we did backdate our coins, so we were striking coins in 1965 that were 90% silver with a 1964 date. So it's more likely that a planchet could have gotten caught up in there. This cost us $6,000. I think that's pretty worth it. It's already really cool when you see a 1965 dime struck on a silver dime planchet, but when you get the nickel variety, nickel denomination, that's a really sort of significant coin error, and it's only number 13. We've got a lot to go. Right here, we've got an overdate 1914 over 3 Buffalo nickel. You can see some of this one almost looks like machine doubled or something like that, but you can see the outline of the 3 up there, and costs several hundred in worn condition, but several thousand in better condition. And that's a great coin. A few different interesting Buffalo nickel varieties that we haven't covered yet. But right here is another one that I love. This one sold a long time ago for $7,000. It's a copper nickel planchet 1944 nickel. So you can see right there, even the P is going to be very clearly above Monticello. So it should be that war nickel 35% silver composition, but instead they found a planchet that was probably left over from 2 years prior, and it got struck with that again, P mint mark above Monticello. So that was definitely the wrong type, sort of wrong planchet, transitional error, and the price reflects that. Where there's also a 1918 over 7 Denver overdate that's more popular and starts in the 4-figure range, but you can see a clear 7 protruding from the top and the bar sort of sticking through the middle of the 8. This one's from about 2000 in really nice condition. This is a $300,000 coin. You're probably most likely to find these on like a Nicodate coin that turns out really well, but it's a really fun one to be aware of and one of the key Buffalo nickel varieties. I think there's one more we'll cover. This is sort of the inverse of what we were talking about earlier. So here's a 1942 coin. If it was going to be silver, I think that they only minted them in Philadelphia and San Francisco. There should be a clear P or S above the Monticello. If it was going to be Denver, they would have, or Philadelphia, without a mint mark, that has to be on a copper nickel planchet. This is the inverse of the coin that was, I want to say, number 12 or 11 or something like that. But in this case, they had a silver alloy planchet struck by dies that shouldn't have been making that, so it sold for about $10,000. There should be a big P above this right here. Or they just forgot a mint mark, but that's pretty unlikely at one of the San Francisco dies for 35% silver nickel. Here we have a struck on a cent planchet Buffalo nickel. Really incredible coin. Great looking, super nice luster, still red-brown, but it survived for a long time. If you see anything that looks like it's on the wrong planchet, that's also probably going to be a very valuable error if it turns out to be authentically misproduced by the U.S. Mint. Number 7 is going to be this Jefferson nickel struck this time on a 1978 Lincoln cent. You can see the host planchet right here. There must have been some analysis. You can see Liberty. You must be able to see 78 down there. And you can see the undertype of 1 cent, and the Lincoln Memorial sold for $12,000. And this wouldn't be extremely obvious if you weren't having a close eye. I mean, the coloration and everything is a little bit off, but this was a really good collector pickup that paid off in the form of 5 figures, and that was a lot more money than it is today back in 2008, so a big find there. Right here is a classic and well-known coin. This is a struck with 2 obverse dies, 2000p Jefferson nickel. You can see on either side, there's a lot of weakness, and because the planchet flow would not have been sort of proper and how it should be, but there were 2 obverse dies that were placed on either side of this planchet. This sold for over $20,000, and this happened in 2000, so it was not a super long ago error. We wouldn't be shocked if there were more of these out there. We just don't know when they would surface. 1916 double die obverse is a very expensive coin, really clear. It's best seen in the date, similar to some of the other Buffalo nickel earlier varieties. And there, you don't need a magnifier or microscope or anything to see this one. You're going to see clearly, especially in the 6, but all the letters are super offset and shelved right to left. But it's not even shelving, it's like 2 separate coins, many thousands in whatever condition you find it in, but it's going to be really tough to pick up. Right here we've got a Buffalo nickel 1913 struck on what would have been a barber dime planchet, and this costs $46,000. I don't have tons of commentary outside of, this is a really tough to find coin, something I'm super excited to have as a standout error in this presentation, and very well known in terms of Buffalo nickel errors. There's even one that's higher up on the list, but before that we've got the Frith Mule, and this coin is interesting because 1942 is the date. Then there's this S mint mark, but that implies that this was a reverse of 1941 die that was striking the coin, because all the 1942 nickels were war nickels at the San Francisco Mint that were struck with a big S above Monticello, and so this implies that it was a 1942 obverse die with a 1941 S reverse die, and so it's different years. There's only one of these known. There was a sale for $11,000 back in 1974, and if you apply, what today's, what it should be, I think the FS 502 might be wrong on that, but maybe it's also right. Forget. This is going to be a really significant nickel, certainly the best in the Jefferson nickel series, and a key competitor across the entirety of all nickels. Then right here we've got the 1913, something that's just kind of wild. It's struck on a half eagle or $5 gold coin planchet. There's been a test cut that would ensure that this is in fact struck on a gold coin, but the size really matches up nicely. This one sold for $78,000. It's a beautiful coin, centerpiece of any error collection, focusing on nickels. It's probably the best one out there. Number 1 will be a totally different coin in a totally different price range and ballpark for what an estimate would be if it came back to auction, but super neat. There's an Indian head cent that's struck on a, I think, 2.5 gold piece, or maybe it's a $5 gold piece, but obviously you can imagine how rare it is for something like this to exist, and so the price is going to correspond. And then our number 1 most valuable nickel in existence is going to be the 1913 V nickel. This is the finest known Eliasberg specimen, graded proof 66, and with approved by CAC. Just an extremely interesting item that's going to have sold for $4,560,000. That's a massive mansion, new house, and maybe retirement and car payoff and everything put together right there. Just an incredible specimen. There, I believe, are 5 of these that are known. It was produced, again, 1883 to 1912, but there were a few that were produced afterwards that were authenticated. They're not faked. And I don't think that this is the Farouk specimen, but they are all in, very prized possessions, sort of probably top 10 or top 20 coins in the world, or certainly in United States history. And I think they even set records at the time for the most expensive coin that had been sold, though they've been eclipsed by other items. I think there's more popularity at the ultra high-end rarities for larger denominations, larger plancha items, but this one is the best of those specimens and commanded that massive price about half a decade ago, and I'll be excited to see what happens when it comes back up for auction, given that some of the high-end rare coin market has certainly increased in price. So hopefully you enjoyed this presentation spanning 50 or 52, because I had tied for 40 nickels that people would want to be on the lookout for, understand, think are cool, but hopefully also inspire you, something like that. It's possible to find this stuff looking through common coins. It's probably going to take a lot of coins to get there, but for the collector, nickels are a great series in addition to pennies to find a bunch of varieties and get your feet wet with the searching. There's also key dates. There's a lot to know, and there's a lot to specialize in. So I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching the video, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to visit our website, treasuretown.com, to stay up to date on everything going on the channel and possibly get some great deals on coins and collectibles. We look forward to seeing you on our future videos, and best wishes until then.